Thank you all for coming. I'm Catherine Potts. I'm the Chief Learning and Engagement Officer here at the Norman Rockwell Museum, and it's a pleasure to welcome you. This is our first of a summer full of programs, all planned in conjunction with the wonderful MAD exhibition. So if you like this program, I hope you come back for more. So tonight, our program is called Growing Up Mad, and it will explore the influence of the magazine on artists and writers working today. We'll hear what happens when young and impressionable minds discover Mad Magazine's rich mix of satire, anti-establishment critique, snarky tone of voice, irreverent humor, and not to mention the magazine's memorable visual style. Our featured speakers are two members of the Mad Diaspora, who grew up reading the magazine and who both fulfilled a shared childhood ambition of becoming contributors to that same magazine. And we will hear from them how Mad was fertile ground for their development as cartoonists, writers, and comedians. So before we jump in and hear more about that, let me first do some introductions. Emily Flake is a cartoonist and writer whose work appears regularly in The New Yorker. She's the author of Joke in a Box, How to Write and Draw Jokes. And Emily will be here again tomorrow at 11 o'clock for a gag word writing workshop that she will be conducting. So if you want to hear more from Emily and learn how to be a jokester, writer, and cartoonist, come.
You can decide after the talk.
She, in this all ages workshop, she'll kind of walk us through exercises that are meant to generate ideas, spark jokes, and inspire cartoons, all in a single panel format. Workshop is free with museum admission. Emily's previous books include That Was Awkward, The Art and Etiquette of the Awkward Hug, and Mama Tried, Dispatches from the Seamy Underbelly of Modern Parenting. She is the founder and proprietor of St. Nell's Humor Writing Residency, located in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and she makes her home in Brooklyn, New York, with her husband, daughter, and what she describes, and I can attest to this, as an absurdly large cat. So more on that. Jason Chatfield is an Australian cartoonist, author, and comedian who's also based in New York. He is the past president of the National Cartoonist Society and Australian Cartoonists Association, and his work has appeared also in The New Yorker, The Weekly Humorist, American Bystander, Wired, Esquire, Art Mail, Variety, and of course, Mad. For 16 years, Jason was Australia's most widely syndicated cartoonist, producing the iconic syndicated 102-year-old cartoon strip, Ginger Meggs. He is the portrait illustrator for Waking Up, the award-winning meditation app, which we need to hear more about, created by Sam Harris. And his art has been exhibited in France, the UK, Australia, and all over the United States. His illustration work has been published through Simon & Schuster, HarperCollins, Penguin Random House, Humorous Books, Scribe Media, and Libra Press. So we are going to turn things over to our speakers. If you have questions, we'll have time for a Q&A at the end. And if you're listening to us online, all you have to do is to put your questions in the chat, and I will ask your questions for you. But enough from me. I want to turn things over to these two genuinely funny people who cut their comedic teeth on Mad Magazine. So welcome Emily Flake and Jason Chatfield.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Catherine.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. It's a pleasure to see everyone's faces tonight. Yeah, so Jason and I both really grew up steeped, not just in Mad Magazine, but in the culture that like surrounded and was influenced by Mad Magazine. Like when we were up there, we both like were drawn like moths to the little like screening of Airplane. An absolutely formative document that I tried to show my daughter when she was, I don't know, maybe 8 or so. It wasn't my proudest parenting moments, in part because my husband was like, this isn't exactly appropriate. And in part because when my daughter didn't laugh, I was like, we need to give her. So what we've prepared for you tonight is kind of an overview of why we are like this, like what put us on the path to becoming cartoonist, which is a ridiculous job.
Ill-advised.
Yeah,
really.
ill-advised, really, truly. We're available. Kind of how we got here, an overview of our work, our relationship with MAD, and yeah, we're just gonna get into it. Let me get the little clicker
You got a
out of my
clicker?
pocket. I got a
Nice.
clicker. They
Look
gave
at
me a
that.
clicker. I know, this is very fancy. It also has a pointer.
Oh, what?
I am
Nobody's-
going to tell you right now that I am drunk on power. Yeah.
Very glad your overly massive cat is not here right now.
Truly. He's 24 pounds, and sometimes I'll do a pointer for him and he'll go, and then he'll just be like, that's too much. So, all
Your
right.
cat weighs more than my dog.
I know. He's a big and precious boy. All right. So,
Wait.
are we like this? So
Oh, wow.
this here is Jason on the lower right-hand side.
Mm.
Jason, you're just making a Mad Magazine face, I
Yeah.
think, in this picture. Also, I like that your friend is giving the finger to the camera. I don't know if you guys know, but Australia is very classy.
Yeah, I was born with Alfred E. Newman ears. That's my resting Alfred face.
Right.
So this is my friend Ben, by the way. We were in a stand-up comedy. We were in a comedy duo for many years. Ben is my gateway drug to Mad Magazine because his dad, who was a Texan, who was living in where I'm from, which is a small town parading as a city called Perth in Western Australia, the most isolated city in the world. You've been there? What did you do? Steal a loaf of bread? Oh, terribly. You're a prison guard? What are you doing? It is pretty. It's very pretty. But there's nothing to do there except, stumble across a giant back catalog of Mad magazines. A lot of black swans. That's right. That's our national flag. That's our state flag.
To a Perth talk now.
This is very much.
Right.
So this is Ben. Ben also was obsessed with Mad magazine, and so we would just spend hours and hours whittling away our childhood, reading old 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s copies of Mad. And that's, so our comedic pedigree was broken from the beginning. Yeah, feels like it.
Yeah. You're going to have to draw that later.
One day.
So, all right, this is me. This is me circa 1987. If you want to build a cartoonist, step one, give a child that haircut. Step two is provide her with a typical 80s childhood, which means no supervision or oversight and lots of inappropriate material. So my cultural stew at that point, as it were, was, of course, Mad Magazine, which I read voraciously. Also, National Lampoon, which was huge for me. I had been subconsciously ripping off Sherry Flanagan for years. And, whatever girly mags I could find in my dad's office. So
Ziggy Stardork.
I said, well, shut up, Ziggy Stardork. Go straight to hell, Jason Chatfield. I also brought a few examples of my grandfather's work. My grandfather was a sign painter and muralist, and he was the cartoonist for the shipyard that he worked at during World War II. He actually had a certificate of merit from the US Navy for excellence in cartooning. So this was a mural that he did for, he did a lot of like buy war bonds. Advertising. He had a character called Joe Jerk. This was like in the safety cartoons thing, like, boy, this burning job is a snap, just a few seconds and I'll be through. Clearly, Joe Jerk is going to fall to his death.
Comes through.
And it comes, yeah, you see.
Wow.
And then after the war, he did, I like to think of this is like a little column that he had called Let's Get Acquainted. I call this Ripley's I Can Believe It or Not. It's basically just like facts about a salesman. Albert Lee Jones Jr., district salesman, Southwest Texas district. And this is probably the coolest picture of any member of my family ever. This is my grandfather in his engineering overalls, working on his cartoon.
So
I don't, listen, it's weird that I think my grandfather is hot, but come on.
I think your grandfather. This is wild. This is a dreamboat.
He's dead. My grandfather also sent this as a card to my sister. Hello, Melissa. Papa loves you and your mom and your dad and your sister. This drawing probably will be unpopular with your dad. This is a portrait of my father, my mother, my sister, and me. I'm the one with the little lollipop. So clearly, we're not a family that prizes feelings. That's another very important step when you're trying to build a cartoonist from scratch. Let's see.
Wow.
This is from my early work. This was probably about as good as it got. My own family portrait. This is mommy, daddy, baby, and horse. Emily Flake, age 5, Manchester, Connecticut. Somehow my sister has written question mark up there.
Next to a question mark.
Next to a question mark. This is a book I wrote called Whiskers by Emily Flake, Pictures by Emily Flake. And again, my sister drawing on my work.
Your editor?
Yeah, seriously. The subtext of this talk is my sister's a jerk. Once she met a boy cat. Mom, a girl said to her mom, I think Whiskers met a boy cat. Oh, said the mother. Well, mom, she's not spayed, said the girl. Oh dear, said the mother. Soon the yard was covered with kittens. So yeah, basically, like, obviously an early interest in, again, inappropriate material. Later in my life, I had a cartoon called Lulu 8-Ball that ran in a number of alt weeklies. So I'll just read this real quick. My whole thing was I would do a super title and then sort of 4 supporting beats. So this was like the least filthy one I could find for people. Afflictions of the idle rich. Ice and cocktail not melting as delightfully as it ought. Thomas, is there something wrong with this glass? Nagging feelings of guilt and emptiness that can only be taken out on staff. Maria, I simply cannot fathom why the concept of hospital corners is so very hard for you to grasp. Tendency among the lower servants to expire after a night of hard use. Just not made of the stuff they used to be, what? Indeed not, sir. And bad case of the meat sweats. An aperitif, Jeeves, forthwith. Except you're not rich, and we just call this super lazy, and you mean digestif, peasant. So after my tenure in alternative news weeklies, which I don't want to shock you, but do not pay very well, I started submitting to the New Yorker. This was one of mine for them. The caption here is, I'm sorry, guys, I guess at our age, truth or dare is a little too fraught. But truly, the highlight of my entire life was when I got into MAD. So the work that I did for MAD mostly ran in what was called the Fundolini section. That was like for shorter gags, jokes. It was like less movie parody and more stuff that was not quite classy enough for the New Yorker. So this is one of mine. The caption here is, that was when I sat on your shoulder and made you make terrible life decisions. I'm sorry, but copying and pasting all these different fonts takes time. Look, I know I'm your sponsor, but if you keep calling while the game is on, I'm just going to let you drink. Excuse me, miss. I have some things to say about your legs, but first I'd like you to sign this consent form. And the little fork is for stabbing fellas in the eye. Fellas. Clearly making my grandfather very proud. This was to show what it looked like in print. Give me a flake is one that they thought of.
Nice.
See, I told you I could fit my whole fist in his mouth. This is probably my favorite one that I ever had in the magazine. So dark. This might actually be one of my favorite cartoons that I've ever done. Obviously, the New Yorker was like, oh, hard pass on this psychopath. So I ran it up the flagpole at MAD, and they took it. And Sam Viviano, who I need to say as a sidebar, was one of the editors at Mad, one of the kindest people I have ever met in my life, like a true angel on earth. We had a long conversation about how best to really sell this gag about suicide. Somebody got this tattooed on their body and then sent a picture of it to Mad Magazine, and they ran that in the magazine. So I don't know if I should be proud or deeply, deeply ashamed. So speaking of Sam, this is Sam Viviano and my daughter a few years ago. This is like really shows like, I mean, this is like a picture of his soul, basically. Again, just like the sweetest person. She has drawn him a picture and is showing it to him. So my tenure at, like, you know, as a freelancer, it's not like I worked in the office. I wasn't there every day. I wish, honestly, in retrospect, that I had gone and bothered them at the office more, because you couldn't like pick a better office space to just hang around in. Yeah. So the way I got into Mad is I'm a stand-up, and I started doing stand-up kind of like as a cartoonist stand-up person. I would show cartoons and kind of do bits and then show some more cartoons. And as it happens, Dave Corrado from Mad was in the audience one night, and afterwards he said, "You should submit to Mad." And I said, "Tell me more." So he emailed me the submission guidelines. I started sending work in and eventually wore them down. I was actually talking with Sam Viviano last night, and he said the meanest thing to me. He said, "Right, your first piece was 18 years ago." And I said, "That's not possible." And he said, "No, 2006 was 18 years ago." And then I cried for about an hour. So yeah, that was 2006. And actually, now that it occurs to me, I got into Mad before I got into the New Yorker.
Yeah, that's wow.
Oh, no, that's a nice little sidebar. Oh, and now it's you. Okay. Now you tell.
Well, I mean, I feel like we were talking earlier about the fact that, you know, as cartoonists growing up reading Mad, as prestigious and wonderful and amazing as it is to be published in the New Yorker, it's a very difficult thing to do as a cartoonist. My Everest was always Mad. Like I always, much to the chagrin of my parents who wished I got a job, I always just wanted to be a cartoonist in Mad. I would read and study the idiots, like in the way that painters study the greats, you know, like I'm studying Mort Drucker, like, you know, as if he's Renoir, you know. So he was Renoir to me. But yeah, I didn't know that you could submit. I thought it was a closed shop. Right. And so to me, it was like, well, one day maybe someone will die and they'll let me. Right. You know.
People die every day.
But not cartoonists.
Right now.
Famously, cartoonists live.
Really. Like...
Jaffe was 102, I think. Yeah. Maybe something like that.
Yeah. It's all the clean living.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so that was my bit. I guess my Everest was trying to get into Mad. I got into the New Yorker before I got into Mad, and it wasn't because I wanted to get into the New Yorker more. It was just that in my head, and this is such a dumb thing, despite the wonderful Ryan Flanders, who was the assistant art director under Sam Viviano, he kept encouraging me to submit to the Flundellini pages. As you just saw, I just had like, I had this imposter syndrome when I just didn't think I was there yet. And then
you saw what I got in. I think you were fine.
I saw that no one's doing better than walkies at my level. So yeah, I just, you know, I guess eventually I had to get, you know, encouraged to submit. And it was people like Sam Viviano and Ryan Flanders and yeah, those guys who were just like, you gotta pitch, you know.
So Ryan was one of the younger, like sort of the new generation editors at the magazine. Yeah. You know, Ryan's about my age. I'm in my 40s. And I was talking to Sam last night because I wanted to know. I'm like, well, you know, what made you take a chance on a dope like me? And he's like, no, I didn't. It was Ryan. Yeah. It's like, oh, right. But Sam was, when I met him in person, very encouraging and hired me to do some illustration work. But the Fundolini pages were a really good way to kind of like get into Mad, at least, like I think they could take more chances on newer voices
Yeah.
and styles that people didn't necessarily like associate with Mad Magazine.
And formats as
and
well.
exactly.
Single gag, like
Yeah.
I think Teresa Burns Parkhurst was talking about like the fact that single gag comics weren't necessarily a Mad thing, really,
Yeah.
but they had a format for it that, kind of gave gag cartoonists a beat. The first thing I ever sold to Mad was something that I pitched to the New Yorker and got a yikes from the cartoon editor. So I was thrilled when Mad bought it. And it was similar. You know what? There's a theme here, and it's death. But it was a guy who, and I didn't put it in the presentation. I should have put it in the presentation. It was a guy who, this was when everyone was taking photos of their meals and posting them on Instagram. They say everyone's breakfast. We don't care that you eat oatmeal. But anyway, it was a priest standing by next to a prison guard, next to a guy, a death row prisoner, who was about to walk the Green Mile, but he had his last meal and he was Instagramming.
That's funny.
And, and it was the New Yorker cartoon editor was like, oh, yikes, that's a no. And I was like, and I said, is it a bit more Mad? And she's like, I don't know, maybe.
Yeah. Go nuts.
Yeah, when I pitched it to Mad, they're like, "Oh, delicious!" Yes.
Right.
I was like, "See, these are my people."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, like joy and prestige in getting into something like the New Yorker, but there's a glee in getting into Mad that, like, only the most insufferable of children read the New Yorker.
And it was depraved to read Mad.
Exactly.
There's something to the idea that, like, we're both comedians, and I, just as a fallback to being a cartoonist, I thought, I should really have something to fall back on. Stand-up comedy's a real steady, yeah.
We're backing all the right horses.
Yeah, and it did feel like there was something about when you meet a comedian or you meet a cartoonist, there's this immediate shorthand. And it's just like, it's like you've known each other for centuries. It's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the Usual Gang of Idiots had that. They
Yes.
had that shorthand. They had that, with the editors.
Mhm.
Anyway, when I was 21, I came to America. I'm sorry to say it was 2006.
Shut up.
Yeah.
Stop that.
I went to the Bunny Bash, which was a big cartoonist party in Long Island. Bunny used to host it for many decades. And everyone was there, I think George Booth was there and Mort Drucker was there. I met Mort, met Tom Richmond, Ed Steckley. And it was one of those things where I was like, oh, they're real people. They're not demigods in this pantheon I've had in my head this whole time. And they encouraged me to come back and visit and gave me great advice. Mort was the nicest man that ever lived. And it's like, it felt like a surreal thing for a kid from Perth. New York is just this kind of shining city on a hill situation, and it didn't exist except on the pages of Mad and Spider-Man. So it was very surreal to then meet people like Mort and Sam. Sam was there as well, I think. And then eventually I went to Mort's studio and got to sit with him. And if you've seen the Mort room here, you'll understand what that does to a cartoonist brain to watch someone like that work. And when I left after that day, it was Adrian Sinnott who let me, who kind of organized the whole thing. He was teaching me how to draw hands, poses, how to do, teaching me how hands and pose can be even more expressive than a face. Right. And just even the joints of the knuckles of things. There's like pre-Mort and post-Mort in my... Post-Mort. Post-Mort, yeah. There's a theme, there's a thread here. And then he gave me, at the end, and I was a big Spider-Man fan growing up, so at the end, he gave me this. He signed it to Jason with love, Mort Drucker. And I've had this in my studio. I've had like 9 studios in my life, and this has been the one thing that follows me around for every studio.
It's a real like totem object.
Oh, I have a signed Bill Watterson, Calvin and Hobbes, and a signed Mad cover from Mort, and that's, people say when you rush into a burning building, this is it. This is what I would, because Mort, when he was, this is 2006 Mort, and that's baby Jason. And this is Tom Richmond's drawing arm, by the way. You only get that from doing movie parodies.
That's how you get swole as a
Yeah.
cartoonist.
and mad cover artist and illustrator, Ed Steckley there as well. When I was there, it was sort of this time when Mad was still in New York and everyone was still contributing. The Usual Gang were all still around, and yeah, it was just this kind of thing to aim towards, you know. And yeah, when I got to spend time with Mort in his studio and learn from him, it was like getting to meet Picasso or something and sit and watch him work. And you learn more from watching someone work than reading about their stuff. And I think I mentioned, you know, my friend Ben and I sat just staring at Star Trek parodies and like, just like with our noses this far from the page, figure, how did he do that? You know, trying to reverse engineer a hand. And Jaffe was the other one. Al Jaffe was, you know,
Beautiful drawing.
I drew this for his birthday a while back, and Sam Viviano gave me notes, which is always nice when an art director like Sam gives you notes because they're very constructive. Yeah, he said you got his grin, his cheeky grin, which took a few goes. But yeah, I think Jaffe as well for his inventiveness. Like that was between those two guys, they were the sort of entryway for me for Mad, and then everything else, you know, everything else within that. Jaffe had his birthday, his 100th birthday in 2021. We couldn't have a party, obviously, but I thought I'd do a Snappy Answers card for him. This is me, the idiot. I tried to draw in Jaffe's style and then realized how hard it is to draw like Al Jaffe. And it was, wow, were you really born 100 years ago? No, I just took an extra long bath. No, I just told that to my doctor so I could get the vaccine. No, I lost my birth certificate in Lithuania. I took a guess. That's a deep cut for Jaffe. And he also he got the Guinness World Record for the longest career in the comic arts. I think it was something like 64 years or something like that. He'd been working since he came over and was working with Stan Lee, and yeah, so that was at Sardi's, I think. Anyway, he had a big impression on me. Yeah, he was a real one of those guys. But yeah, I mean that was my you know comedic pedigree, and then obviously the final big thing was getting to sign the wall. There's some Mad mythology here, I guess.
Yeah.
Is that there was this wall at Mad Magazine at the offices that Emily was talking about. And it was a lot of the contributors who kind of would visit from wherever they lived and would get to sign the wall if they got to be contributors. And for most of my visits to Mad, I never got to sign it because I was never a contributor. I was always this sort of, you know, visiting dilettante. When I finally got in, the pride and joy to sign next to Sam Viviano.
Wait, back up a second.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. That's you. I remember seeing that one and being like, oh, she is.
Do we know where this is now?
It's in Burbank.
Is it?
Yeah, it's on the wall in Burbank. Another person who signed it, because I'm going to just jump up for a second. I do have I know, but I don't want to blind anyone. And
it doesn't show up on the screen very well,
Oh.
sadly. So the screen is its kryptonite.
So as far as, and I'll touch on this, but Nick Meglin signed it, and then his grandson, Max Korn. Anyone who knows Mad knows Max Korn with a K. He signed it here, right underneath, which was really sweet. He got to go in and sign that.
Peter Cooper getting very artsy.
Yeah.
With his, like, you know, the K and the P are his eyes.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to tell you, the pressure to sign
Oh my
something
God.
like this is enormous.
Yeah.
You know, this is like as in front of your peers as you
Right.
ever, it's your name and like with everybody you admire.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I mean, it's
I'm
everything.
saying, can I smoke in here? But I like the Flanders has had enough.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, this is.
Got the bathtub too.
Yeah,
This is, I mean, this is.
that's
just
Keith Knight, by the
marvelous.
way, the bathtub, Keith Knight.
Yeah.
So this, I mean, this to me was like Everest.
Yeah.
From childhood, I knew about this silly whiteboard. Anton Emden signed it. He's an Australian cartoonist. So did Glenn Leave. He's the big head, there it is, with the butt behind it. And I guess, and I wanted to ask you about this, because of all the people that influenced me in Mad, just had the biggest influence on me comedically. I've made no bones about the fact that my favorite cartoonist, as great as Mort was, and Jack, and as great as Don Martin was with teaching me onomatopoeia, and as great as pretty much, and Angelo Torres and Sam and everyone sort of having this ability to do a thing better than anyone else, and Tom Richmond with his movie parodies. The favorite cartoonist of all time that I have of Mad is Sergio.
Yeah.
I mean, he always, and then the one most influential person of all was Nick Meglin. He did more to my brain through Mad, and then after meeting him, than anybody who ever worked for Mad. It was Nick.
Say more.
Well, I wanted to ask you about it because he was really the voice behind so much of it. After '84, I think he became I was born in '84. So
Stop.
I know, I'm 40, get out of here. So he had this voice, he's the kind of, when you think of Mad, when I think of Mad, and when I hear Mad in my head, and the tone and the humor and the attitude and the perspective, and just the ability, it's not Bill Gaines, and it's not as much as he, carried that through and everything. And he embodied it. He was it. It was just Nick, and he was behind every page.
Right.
He really brought, and like an uncredited writer, really. He just brought everything a little bit higher, a little bit funnier.
Right.
And the more you go back and realize just how much influence he had on tone and voice and style and everything.
Sure.
It was, he did a book with his daughter, Diane Meglin, called Drawing from Within, which I read, is the only book I read every year because I always get something new out of it. It's just drawing exercises. As I say, it's the best drawing exercises. He was an artist in his own right who would never claim that. And I mean, he was great, but he would just always be lionizing other people. And yeah, I think Nick Meglin is the great unsung, maybe sung, I don't know, unsung hero and genius of why Mad was as funny as it was when it was, when he was at the helm. With the greatest of respect to John Ficarra and everyone else, Nick he had the biggest influence on me of anyone.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it really can't be overstated just how much, like, whether you have like a particular person in mind when you're talking about Mad, or just the tone of the magazine. I mean, for me, it was Sergio Aragonés because like, even just looking at the clips that they were showing of Airplane up there, when I was a kid, I loved like the little jokes going on in the background.
Chicken
and
fat.
Sergio's marginalia and everything. It felt like somebody had put little jokes in there just for me to find. And it was such a particular joy that it really is like, a formative memory.
It's like a private joke.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But more to the point, I think that it really laid a base for me, and probably anybody who like read it and sort of like, took their life lessons from it, of seeing the world through a comedic lens.
That's what it was.
Of understanding that like everything, even like the worst things, can be made fun of. Like the scariest things can be knocked down to size with humor.
Yep.
It's a way to understand the world that was extremely formative to me. It gives you like this one step of remove where you can kind of like take the world and make it something that you can understand by like, all right, what are the angles with which I can, like make fun of this?
Yeah.
And for me, I think that sort of like beating heart of a notion is what made Mad completely formative for me.
Yeah, yeah, and the same. I mean, it's a prism through which you end up seeing the world. It's like a lens that someone gave you, and now you can't not see a politician speaking without you just
Easier.
exactly yeah.
Yeah.
It's the only thing that makes it tolerable
Yeah.
is that you get to put this lens over it and go, wouldn't this be funny? And then you get to pitch that to an editor or someone and go, hey, what about this?
Yeah, exactly.
It's the only thing that makes, life tolerable under a certain presidency. Yeah.
When they are just a
Sure.
cartoon at this point.
Yeah.
Well, and something too, I mean, talking about like specific cartoonists as influences, I mentioned Sherry Flanagan before, who again is like, I mean, I don't want to stray too far from the theme, but like Sherry Flanagan and Linda Berry are like my two like, goddesses, and absolutely two of the biggest influences on my life, not for nothing, but like, they're both women. Women not super represented in the pages of Mad for a lot of it. That was something that Fondolini, I think, was like a good way to get in. They could really, they could offer those to the girls.
In their defense, they
did I
only
get in
admitted
as a
idiots.
diversity hire? Maybe. Do I care?
Yeah, no, I think we've been talking about the fact that everyone in the magazine had their own voice, which is so important because as I'm not sure if it's in the video, but Sam talking about the fact that when Tom Richmond was pitching to try and get into Mad, he was kind of so close to Mort Drucker that Sam was like, well, we've got Mort. Like, you got to bring yourself to the table.
Right.
And he gave me the same advice.
Which is a very important and hard lesson for a young cartoonist to learn because, like anything, you start out imitating the people that you love. And then after years and years and years, you kind of like make this your own. But yeah, and you think, well, if I can draw like somebody that they're already using, why wouldn't they want me? And yeah, it turns out the answer is because we got that guy.
Yeah.
Like do something interesting.
And to his credit, he did. He brought something new and interesting to the magazine, and so did you. And there were voices that got to be in the magazine in its later years. I feel like we're in the later school, technically of Mad. Let's say the dregs. You got to get to the bottom of the barrel eventually, And there were lots of cartoonists that once Mad had moved out to California, much to my chagrin, I mean, I moved to New York to, be amid Mad and the New Yorker and these great august, all right, let's not give it too much. But, these amazing historic publications after like 60 something years or whatever it was, and then they just went to California, which New Yorkers love when people move to LA. But it actually, one of the biggest challenges was finding voices for Mad that would fit, that were new as well. And you got to give Bill Morrison credit for finding a lot of people that hadn't yet been in Mad, who wouldn't have ordinarily got the chance.
Yeah.
And Bill and Susie were kind of instrumental in rebuilding. They increased the subscriptions. They kind of rebooted it a bit, and it's what an insanely difficult thing to do, to take something like Mad and try and modernize it in such a way to appeal to an audience that every 5 seconds there's something new and different and shiny and distracting. It's almost an impossible task, but to their credit, they did a great job.
Right.
Yeah.
That is something that I think about a lot. I mean, I have a daughter who's 11, and I weep for her generation. No, I don't know what secret intangible joy kids her age will have necessarily. I mean, a lot of kids my daughter's age obviously are like, super into TikTok, et cetera, et cetera. To my everlasting comfort, she thinks TikTok is stupid, and she's built her entire personality around hating Taylor Swift.
Right.
But in terms of like, there's something about having this thing that you can hold that like has this really like, totemic quality.
Yes.
And that you can really absorb yourself in a way that you just can't and don't on a screen. You can't you can't really spend time, I don't want to say worshiping, but it's a form of devotion. The attention to which you pay something like a Mad magazine when you're a kid really is a devotional act.
Oh, 100%. I
Yeah.
could recite entire parodies at one point.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and visually, I would try and copy and trace and reverse engineer poses and study line. And I think I learned pose from Jack Davis and Mort and people who and like Rockwell is a great example as well. Norman Rockwell, you know, when you can tell a story through pose without a single word being written, that's the gold standard, which is why I love Sergio so much.
Yeah.
Is that he can not only tell a story, he can tell a joke. And he didn't speak English, a lot of English, when he first moved to New York. And so he was the gold standard in pantomime, really, in teaching to show, don't tell.
Right.
Which is my favorite kind of joke. It's my favorite New Yorker cartoon. It's my favorite Mad cartoon. Just anything that's just, even if it's just I say just, if it's marginalia, some of the funniest jokes are the marginalia.
Yeah, absolutely.
With respect to everybody else in the magazine, it really, the most memorable ones in my brain don't have a single word in them. The covers, you know, they had an indelible sort of effect. Like you say, I studied them like art majors study paintings, which is what a misspent youth. But there are originals in this exhibition, and anyone watching on Zoom, you have to come to this exhibition. It's insane.
Yeah.
That where I know, I'm looking at the originals of pieces that I know I'm so familiar with, intimately familiar with every line, because I was staring at it when it was reduced down, you know, to print, and to see it at 170% and see the little whiteout marks and things.
Right.
It's a masterclass is what it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
That tangible, totemic thing that you're talking about. And there's a great, and I'm going to geek out for just a second. David Apatow wrote a great piece about Mort Drucker's attention to detail that only Mort would notice. Something that even the art director would have just said is fine. And it's a knob on the back of a lamp. I think it's a MASH parody or an ER parody. And it's honestly, it's this gigantic, elaborate scene in an operating theater. And there's scalpels and people and caricatures and movement, and there's all this detail. But somewhere in the background here, there's this lamp, and there's a little knob on the back of the lamp. And you wouldn't even notice it.
Right.
But he just wasn't happy with it.
Right.
And he kept redoing it. And then you can see him whiting it out and changing it.
Right.
And you could say that's like a fanatic OCD, whatever. It's not.
No.
It's a joy of process, but it's also a joy of the craft of doing something.
Process here, Jason?
Sorry, yeah, process is all I know. And that is a masterclass in taking joy in the thing, in the making of the thing, and then there's being a physical artifact.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
And that, you know, and that is the act of a true master.
Totally.
Yeah. And then you have dopes like me who I had a gag run in the New Yorker a while back, and you know, they put it on socials, and somebody was like, that table. And I looked and I realized
That's my worst nightmare.
not an impossible table, but a deeply improbable table. And I was like, oh no.
Was it like an Escher drawing?
It was just like, you know, it was, I'm like, oh, this would tip over in 2
Right.
seconds, you know? And yeah, and it's like, well, it's kind of one of those things where you don't see it till you see it, unless you're more Drucker and you see it, because
That's kind of it. You develop a filter for it.
you do. Yeah. Or you don't.
That was the distinction though with Mad, was that someone like Sam would see it and go, hey, just by the way, you should probably fix that little thing, otherwise it's gonna haunt you in your dreams. I'll race through a couple little things. This was when I got to go to Burbank to the new studios that's Tom Richmond. He did a lot of the Mad parodies for the last one, and a lot of the books, by the way, the spin-off books, the parodies, Goodnight Batcave, Don't Let the Penguin Drive the Batmobile, Superman and the Miserable, Rotten, No Fun, Really Bad Day. Tom taught me something really important, which was something that Ryan Flanders also imparted, which was like, because I was a freelancer for my whole career, I would just chameleon my style to whatever was needed. And I did that for Mad as well. But Tom has this amazing ability to mimic the style of like Mo Willems and like every like the original artists of these things to make the parody land, which is so hard. It is exhausting, but he's a great example of being able to do that. Yeah.
Because the headline on the
Yeah.
Mad Magazine unveils
Yes.
a damning and dark school shooting strip.
It was an
I
Ed
just want
Gorey
to say
parody.
like
Yeah.
a second about like just the power and importance of satire.
Yep.
Is the ability to like take the emotional heart of something and distill it to a sharp and stabbing joke that like really brings it home in a way where you can tune out the misery of the news, and
Yeah.
you can read the headlines about like yet another school shooting, but like good satire will cut through the noise and make you feel again.
Yep.
And that,
remember it.
yeah, exactly.
Because whenever
it's not just making light. It's not just making fun or being entertaining. I think that there is a purpose beyond for satire.
And I think it was an Edward Gorey parody they did. It was. You're right. Yes. Yes.
Bill Morrison was brilliant.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
That was and it was a ballsy move. That was a brave move to run that. That was a big deal. And it paid off, I think. That's Max Korn. That's that's Nick Meglin's grandson signing the board. That's Bill Morrison's old office. I got to meet Sergio eventually this was like 2011 in Boston. And I've never been happier to meet a cartoonist, really. They say don't meet your heroes. That's a lie. Because Sergio...
It's not true of cartoonists.
It's not,
nice. Like I don't think I can think of more than 2 or 3 bad people cartoonists.
But yeah, that's Sam Viviano, art director. That's Sergio. This is Anton Emden, who's a fellow Australian cartoonist who did a lot of Mad parodies and a lot of artwork and illustrations for Mad. If you've ever got the opportunity to find a video or a recording of Sergio telling his story about how he killed Marty Feldman. Accidentally, allegedly. It is one of the funniest. He wrote a comic about it. And if you just Google Sergio Aragonés Marty Feldman, but it's something about Sergio's voice. I'd like to tell you about Marty Feldman. And it's just this pacing and tone, and he sounds like his cartoons, which is weird because they're pantomime.
Right.
So, but he just sounds like they feel. And when I was in Australia, I would try to copy there was a comedian podcast, and they wanted a Mort Drucker style Mad parody. And I went to try and do it, and I realized how insanely much work and how hard it is to do. And one of the podcast hosts is a comedian, Carl Chandler. He was like, "I'll write it if you draw it." I'm like, I feel like you got the easy end of the bargain here. But yeah, it was again a reminder of just how much work goes into these things. And the comic strip I did for 16 years, Ginger Megs. When I finally got into Mad, that was the image I used to announce. That was there, at New York Comic Con. But I got to, you can kind of see the influence. Like Don Martin, I think I had a lot of when there's things that come up. Like this was a joke that ran in Mad. Just the guy walking in the park. And to Emily's point, the chicken fat was always my favorite little side joke. And then, it's another, it's robocall. Stop calling me a stupid robot. And fun drawing the background characters. And then he's in love.
It's one of my favorite ones of your cartoon.
I did this one with a comedian called Ian Hunt, who I ended up getting to do I introduced him to the Mad team to do Mad's Twitter account. He would write topical tweets, and he's a really funny comedian and writer. And I got to do things like this, which was, I mean, just in different styles. And yeah, I mean, so was those 4 years. But yeah, I mean, mother. I got to draw some pretty fun things at Mad while I was contributing, and this is 6 years old. It's a 6-year-old cartoon.
As a side, obviously, like the Trump administration made satire impossible because they would just go past the line every
Yeah.
single day in reality.
It just became
But
reality.
What really makes me so angry is how much fun those jerks were to draw.
Yeah, they look like
Ugh.
villains that
Yeah.
someone made up so that, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of this kind of stuff that felt like a gimme. And then every now and then you'd get an email and they'd say, hey, we want you to draw in a certain style, like Chuck Jones, like a Roadrunner cartoon. Can you do it? And I'd just say yes and figure it out later.
Right.
But this is a cartoon that, and this is the first time I'm saying this, so I'm a little nervous. I had a big long chat with the editor about this one because I was a little nervous. I didn't write the gag, but I illustrated it. And at the time, Bill Morrison was the president of the National Cartoonist Society. I was his deputy. I was the deputy president, the vice president. Anyway, we had a running joke that whenever I did anything for him or helped put something together or design something or edit it, proofread it, he'd give credit to me and misspell my name. And so I had like several pseudonyms every time he gave me credit for something. And he said, for this one, he goes, I'm not gonna lie, there was it's kind of dark, but the Charlie Hebdo thing had happened, and there were mumbles and talks and noises and Salman Rushdie-isms, and I said, yeah, I don't know if you want to put my name on this one. And the gag is so silly and it's goofy and it's, it's Donald Trump as the Roadrunner and Osama bin Laden. Clearly, just in case anyone was mistaken that it was him, we literally added, hey, bin Laden, look, in case anyone was thinking, hey, what is that yeah, free terrorists. It's such a goofy, Chuck Jonesy, Tex Avery situation. So anyway, he said, do you want to take your name off it? I was like, what if you just use one of those stupid names you give me and then just, I don't know, someone can't Google me? And so he did. So this is written by John Zakua, who's way more brave than me because he wrote it. And then artist Jaden Chatswold, who now you can find me. Yeah, that's the one and only time in my career as a cartoonist I've ever questioned not signing a cartoon.
Wow.
But people be crazy, so it's just one of those. Yeah, and this is a New Yorker reject that ended up in Mad. Heads up, Sir Merlin has written a tell-all parchment. It was because there were all these books coming out from ex-Trump, like angry ex-Trump staffers. It was like a tell-all memoir of the Trump White House. It was like 65 of them. And they can't all be tell-alls. And I wonder if the king ever had like a tell-all parchment. Anyway, yeah, so after a while, they would get me to just illustrate other people's silly gags. Joey Chestnut. Yeah. Joey Chestnut ate 74 hot dogs to once again win Nathan's hot dog eating contest. Meanwhile, Joey Hot Dog ate 74 chestnuts. Nobody cared. Nobody cared. A scene we'll never get to see. So tell me, what made you seek marital counseling? She's scratching Catwoman, scratching the couch. The spray bottle. This is that famous cover of Kim Kardashian breaking the internet. And I had to turn this one around in like 2 hours. They were like, quick, can you do this in 2 hours or not at all? I was like, yes, I'll figure it out. Pardon me, President, amazing self-pardoning action with barely detachable smartphone. Humility not included. Yeah, so I had to change my style for every gag they gave me because they were like, can you do it in this style? Can you do it in this style?
Right.
Which lets you flex a different muscle every time you do something.
Can you do it in Jaden?
Yeah, you can do it in Jaden Chatswold. And my writing partner, Scott Dooley, ended up getting a lot of stuff in Mad as well, which was always great because he always had some really silly jokes that we got to kind of throw in there. Yeah. Nuclear football. Bill Morrison wrote that gag. He takes full credit, but yeah, again, trying to draw like Charles Schultz, just casually draw like Sparky, And this one actually happened 3 weeks ago. Hurry, we need more quarters. It was a 3-year-old stuck in a claw machine. And oh yeah, the Pahoa volcano eruption in Hawaii. Another day of the raging orange menace that destroys everything in its path. Also, a volcano has erupted in Hawaii. Anyway, but yeah, you get the picture. I got to do a lot of silly styles and comic stuff, and you know, when Infinity War was a thing, the universe's resources are finite. By killing half of its lives, I'm saving it. You monster. Hang on, Tony. Let's hear him out. Really? Yeah, normally this is where everyone tries to kill me. Like, it's been a rough couple of years. Keep talking. That's Peter John Burns wrote that one. But yeah, that was the you can't really see it, but this was my first appearance in Mad, which was the selfie taking death row prisoner. It was the proudest day of my career of getting in Mad, and that's my insane murder wall in the background of different artistic influences and stuff. Yeah, and then yeah, original or tangy barbecue. That was this is what you get when you try and raise someone religious.
Right.
They tried sending me to an Anglican school. I'm like, I'm just gonna write jokes about it. I'm not gonna actually leave the bottle. This was a oh baby, and 10 Commandments that'll blow your mind.
You know,
BuzzFeed does the Bible.
And did not get two guys looking at like something that had been nailed to the wall, and he's saying 95 theses, like number 92 will blow your mind, and they just kept not buying.
Really?
Yeah, and you know, now there's this.
This
so.
got rejected so many times before Mad bought it, which gives you a real idea of the quality of Mad. You know,
Right.
just but BuzzFeed does the remember BuzzFeed? Yeah, but BuzzFeed does the Bible. Scroll down, yeah. And the boom operator protest, the microphone boom operator protest, and yeah, and that was me finally getting to hang out with Sergio. I in the UK we got to sign together at a comic arts festival, so that was like, you know, that was Disneyland for me. That was crazy. Anyway.
All right, well, I think that is our signature.
California calling.
Right. I guess, yeah, let's open this up to some questions. What do y'all want to know?
And actually, I made a mistake. So if anybody online has a question, you should type it into the Q&A. There is no chat.
Okay. Mhm. Sir?
When I think of working for Mad Magazine, I think of Looney Tunes and Termite Terrace and all kinds of crazy things. I know it was past, you know, it's a little later in the history of the magazine and you weren't there. Was there anything unique about, you know, working there? What were the people like? Was it as wild as I'd like to think it was, or not really?
I mean, my impression wasn't so much that it was wild. It just seemed very kind. It seemed like, you know, people really, really cared about what they were doing and they were working hard, but it seemed like there was a real atmosphere of, you know, like generosity of spirit, and love of what they were doing. And God, so much cocaine.
Personality type to the artists and people who work there?
Cokehead. No.
You sure?
No. I don't know. We can take
Nope.
that.
No. That's funny.
A personality type. I mean, I would say just like not obsessives in a way that like implies the kind of like single focus, like, you know, like incel kind of situation. I hate to keep coming back to this word, but people who were truly like devoted.
Yeah.
Yeah, a bunch of like, yeah, true devotees.
I feel like there was the ethos of the whole, if there was a personality type or if there was a character to it, it was anti-authoritarian. It was like anything that got above, it took itself so seriously and was so serious.
Yes.
It was just like, it was like a spotlight had been shone on it, and Mad were the moths.
Yeah.
They were like, oh, we're on it. Like as soon as anything started to become of significant cultural importance, or there was something in the zeitgeist that people were talking about, or an admiration that was sort of earned.
Right.
It was just, it with the pitches.
Mhm.
I remember Sam Viviano and John Ficarra, and I think Des Devlin, Charlie Cadu, talking about these pitch meetings with Nick Meglin and with those guys where they would just throw out volume.
Mm.
And it was just pitch, 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 joke, 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 joke. And it was like something stuck. But like you said, it was like an obsession.
Mhm.
They would admire and pay attention to the craft of a joke,
Mhm.
but they would never disrespect the readers to the point where they would like spoon feed them a gag.
And truly unusually, it was a group of people like devoted to the idea of undercutting like societal bullshit.
Yeah.
But in no way were they the kind of like edgelord type people who wanted to like make fun of people or like.
No, it was no malice.
Yeah, truly no malice. And I don't know if I can express just how rare that is.
It's like a goofy, somewhere between goofy and acerbism. It's like, which is a huge, delicate balance to strike. Because you don't want to be, when you're doing satire, you don't want to be an asshole, but you also really want to hit your mark.
Yeah.
And that's tough. It's like being a roast comic almost.
Well, it's like, does anybody here box? Yeah. No. Like, if you're a fighter, and you want to hit hard, you want to hit where you're, but there's a respect in the ring.
Yeah.
So like that skill is important, like in the ring, and it doesn't make you an asshole. If you go and you just sock somebody in the face,
yeah,
then you're an asshole.
Yeah, it's and there's no
I'm
merit.
sorry, you didn't bring me here to define assholism.
Nice bonus.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that character is the thing that carried through every editor and every staff, and it just carried through those mad trips that they took. They all had that healthy, and there's a wall of more tributes from all the usual gang you can see in there. So you want an indication of the personality type. That wall is a perfect example. Is just a deep and abiding respect and love for each other, but also like a gentle ribbing at the same time. They couldn't just say, "Hey, I love you, man." They're like, "Hey, I love you. What's with the moustache? Why doesn't your beard join up?"
You just have like uncut feelings.
It-
It's disgusting.
It was healthy disrespect. Yeah.
We have a question about whether or not either of you ever went against Sergio in one of those quick draws.
Oh, God.
I was gonna ask you just to explain what a quick draw is.
I would never. Did you? Ooh,
Suicide.
yeah.
Yeah, you were going to
idiots, not
explain what
fools.
a quick draw. The quick draw is Sergio would have an overhead projector, and basically, I mean, he's the fastest person. I have tried to emulate him. I can't. It's basically an overhead projector with a sheet of paper, and he would draw these very, very quick cartoons. But he did the great thing that a comedian does, where he holds the punchline until the very end. So he'll draw everything in the cartoon that keeps you kind of guessing about the setup. You're like, is that an umbrella? What is that shoe? And then all of a sudden, he'll leave the final line to the very end and he'll draw it and he'll just bang, huge laugh from a full audience at like Hall H at San Diego Comic-Con, like thousands of people just dying laughing because he's a genius at it. It's just one of the things he has that he can do, and no one else, I don't know of anyone else who can do that.
No.
Are most people funny in person? Are most cartoonists funny in person?
I'll let you answer that one.
Thanks.
Maybe.
It really depends. I mean, I think there's like with any like profession, I think there's a range of personalities, and like some people get into cartooning because they're funny and they like to tell jokes, but they don't necessarily like, people looking at them with their eyes. So, some people are like very, shy and retiring in person. I will say that again, for the most part, most cartoonists that I've met are very kind, like very generous and like, funny, but not necessarily look at me people, and that's different, I think, than comedians who are a little like broken in a different way. inside.
That's a good way to put it. Broken in a different way.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you have, when you hang out with a comedian and you realize they're quite dark and quiet and maybe serious, and you're like, oh, you're not like you are on stage at all.
Right.
Cartoonists are similarly, and this is, look, and it varies, but and take this with a grain, because this is from my experience as president of the National Cartoonist Society, so I got the full gamut. So some cartoonists use their cartoons as many of them use them as the conduit for their voice, their comedy, their expression. And so they're hilarious on the page, but then you meet them and they're these mousy, quiet kind of, like one of my favorite cartoonists of all time, Richard Thompson is a good example. He was hilarious and silly, and his cartoons were goofy and funny and biting and incredibly well drawn. And you meet him and you'd be lucky he was just so quiet and so, he would just, it's like everything came out on the page. And so there are cartoonists who are like that. And then there are cartoonists who are not like that.
Right.
Like Tom Gamble. No, so like there are cartoonists who are also comedians, and then you see that they use cartooning for some stuff and comedy for some stuff. And then there's people like Nick Meglin. And I keep coming back to, I don't think I spent more than 20 seconds with him without laughing.
Right.
Ever. He would greet you and go, don't you owe me $5? Like he would have a gag ready every minute. And it wasn't that he was on, which is exhausting.
Right.
He was just him. And he was hilarious at all times. So the writers were funny, the cartoonists were funny, but a lot of them did use the cartoons as their outlet. Yeah. Yeah, I think Jaffe was a bit quiet, but devastating when he spoke. Do we have any? Yeah.
When they've got putting it together, how do they make this? They've got so many different contributors, different types of articles. But let's say it's a presidential election or something like that, where you've got a really strong lead in.
Yeah.
How do they make the rest of the magazine sort of flow with a big story that's there?
I mean, Sam Viviano would be the man to ask about that, and John Ficarra.
You want me to call him?
Yeah, let's go. They're on the line now.
Yeah.
From my understanding, and this is from just asking Sam and John and those guys, is there was a real production line. When they were churning out so many issues at a time, they would have these publication deadlines and dates, and they were pretty organized for as many moving parts as there were. But I know that they had these tentpole issues that they could hang things off, like, for instance, a presidential election or something. They knew that, okay, by November, we're going to have this big thing. And so maybe that piece is going to be better for that issue. Someone pitches them something and they're like, well, actually, that would fit better next to this thing we have with Peter Cooper. And so, like, I think eventually it just became like it's like you do something so long that it becomes second nature and you can't quite explain how you're doing it, but you're doing it. It's like muscle memory. And they had that. They had a shorthand and they had this system. And I don't think they could have handed off and explained that system to anyone, even if they tried. But yeah, it's just, I think they just found.
And were they
that.
working on several issues
Oh,
at
yeah.
a time? So as they say, let's move this here, move that there.
Yeah, I think, I mean, obviously the next issue was always the most, but yeah, in their head, they had this calendar of issues, which is such a, God, it's the stress of it. Just getting things in on time, herding cats, like getting cartoonists to turn things in on deadline. Are you kidding me? Just little
Cats
cats.
in general, just cats of every size.
Getting cartoonists to turn in pages on time. I mean, you could
hound down people like me. Ugh. No, thank you.
Yeah, that's one hell of a job, especially during, like, yeah, as you say, like an election. Or you're like, all right, we need to go to press by Friday, and then Friday morning, hey, it's like coming, Yeah, there are a lot of late nights and stuff. I've heard some crazy stories, but for the most part, from my understanding, like Mort Drucker, I don't think ever missed a deadline. And there are some of those guys, they had such respect for the magazine and for the process and for the people. They didn't want to be the squeaky wheel.
Right.
So they'd turn it either in early or day of, like deadline. So I think for the most part, they were pretty consistently reliable. There's always one or two, but I'm sure that's That's a story for John and Sam and the gang, and
Mhm.
Ryan and Doug to share.
Mhm.
Yeah.
As a member of the older generation, it seems like society just moves so fast now. There's
Mhm.
so much media and I mean, how do you keep up? Or if you have a thought, can you get something out before it's gone out of the consciousness?
Well, I mean, for very topical stuff, like the New Yorker has a daily cartoon. So, and the process for that is, you submit it at 9, they let you know by 10, finishes due by noon. And then they put it up on the website. So that's, it doesn't run in print. It's just like supposed to react to something in the news. But, you can, if you don't want to go through the process of trying to submit it somewhere, because I write a lot of short satire as well. And if something is timely, there are channels you can submit to where you're like, this is like a 24-hour news cycle thing. But also, if you're like, I have this thought, it's going to be irrelevant in half an hour, that's what Twitter and Instagram is for. You can keep feeding the unending maw of the beast, if you want to.
That and the monoculture problem as well.
Mhm.
So like when Mad could do a cover of like Who Shot JR, everyone was talking about that.
Right.
And to see that Sam Viviano cover and everyone knew who that face was, everyone knew what the gag was, the reference. Now things are splintered so much into these different niches and interests and attention spans
Yeah.
that to even make some kind of joke and hope to God that if it's not something like Taylor Swift or something, that anyone's going to get the reference, let alone that it's going to stand the news cycle, is really difficult. I mean, you're stabbing at water at this point. And the daily cartoons for the New Yorker, which both Emily and I do, are so difficult only because you pitch by 9 a.m., I think, and they say yes by about 11-ish, maybe latest, and they 10. And then you have to turn it in before noon. So it's pretty tight. And I think Matt actually gave me the skill to be able to turn that stuff around because they were doing dailies. A lot of the ones you saw here were dailies for Mad. And they were like, you've got an hour. And I'm like, oh, crap. Oh my God. And so you don't have time to mess about with like being a perfectionist. You just got to get it done. But also the reason it's so quick turnaround is because the story might be dead in the water in an hour. And there's that, is it Robert Layton? Is the Layton cartoon of the wife coming into the studio of the cartoonist saying, oh, that cartoon you did of Trump this morning just happened.
Right.
And he's like, because it is like this, the news cycles have gotten ever smaller, but also the niches and attention spans have gotten smaller, which means to make a joke that's going to land the way that the jokes that you see in the exhibition, they don't have the same, I don't want to say resonance, but it's the ephemeral.
It's more
like
ephemeral.
the blue. Someone mentioned the blue and gold dress to me the other day, and I went, "The what?"
Right.
And I was like, "That may have been the last day on the internet that everyone was talking about the same thing."
Right. Yeah.
And even then, it was like a ephemeral.
Well, yeah, and more to the like, talking about Sam's Dallas cover, that show like was popular when I was like 5, but I knew who Larry Hagman was. And there was like more of like an understand, like, there were things that were popular.
Yeah.
And at this point, the people that my daughter and her cohort know and talk about, I'm like, I have no idea. And what's more, I don't want to know.
Yeah, which that's, again, I bring it back to the full credit goes to Susie and Bill for trying to do those jokes because it's not easy.
Right.
And they had a Twitter writer, Ian Hunt, who was doing topical, by the hour, doing topical jokes. It was really hard. I don't know how they did it.
Do you know what the demographics are of the people who are currently reading Mad?
Oof.
I don't mean age-wise.
Right.
No idea.
I don't know. The answer to that is probably somewhat grim. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, it's in reruns except for the fold-in, which Johnny Sampson is doing, and the covers. And once in a while, there's some other spot content in there that is new, but I don't know. Susie would know.
So it's pretty much over, really?
I mean, I'm not going to say it.
Yeah.
but
You saw Weekend at Bernie's. Sorry.
oh boy. Oh yes,
Sorry.
oh, yeah.
Comics, jokes, and that are, cartoons and stuff, are they online now?
Are most comics and cartoons online was the question.
Like in general or for?
Like say, like the New Yorker, they run them online as well as.
They do, yeah. I mean, they've got the daily that runs,
Handy, I didn't know that.
yeah. So and then they do put the ones that appear in the magazine online as well. And
There's a New Yorker app,
yeah.
and there's a website and a newsletter that goes out every day, a humor newsletter. So they have like the caption contest in there. They have the magazine cartoons in there. They have the daily cartoon. They have daily shouts, which are different every day.
Like, online. Are there any other like online newspapers and stuff that are strictly online that also have their cartoonists?
The Weekly Humorist, the American Bystander.
Yeah, although the bystander
Bystanders,
is
yeah.
basically just print, although the American Bystander, if you have any love in your heart for print media, please subscribe to the American Bystander. It is a beautiful magazine, and a lot of crossover with the New Yorker and Mad. But yeah, it's just a gorgeous humor magazine. But yeah, I mean, and there was a website called The Nib that was a great, it's recently deceased, but was a wonderful outlet for cartoons. But yeah, no, it turns out the bottom's really fallen out of everything.
I will say though, the cartoonists are the most, and we could probably, tie it up on a positive note, hopefully. Cartoonists are like the cockroaches of the media business.
Is that your positive?
That's the positive. Yeah, exactly. She knows where I'm getting. You can cut their head off. They're gonna survive. They're gonna figure out a way to survive. They're nuclear winter. Like there are the death of cartooning has been. I mean, every generation has talked about it. And they always figure out some way to find their audience and to have their audience, like to build a community of people around their work, the way that people admire Rockwell and then want to share it with everyone. It's that same joy of finding something you love and then identifying as someone who loves that thing and then wanting to find your people through that thing. And there are people who have like Patreons and Instagrams and Substack newsletters and places that rather than trying to find the artist through a magazine or a website or a publication, now it's really going directly to the artist. And what I like to do when I post stuff is just like share, almost as if I am kind of a magazine in some way, just kind of find other people I like who I think the people reading my stuff would also like, and sort of share their work and go, hey, by the way, there's other people doing this that you might enjoy. And then they find their work, and then it's this sort of, subscription.
Good night.
Yeah. No, it's subscription. So they pay a monthly fee. And it does actually, it's knock on wood. For now, that model works quite well. Paying the creator directly instead of through some kind of magazine subscription is pretty effective. And
if you reach a certain point, there is a very long tail of creators who like either their work is free or they have like 2 or 3 paid subscribers. Like with anything, if you hit it big on Substack or any monetized platform, it can be great. The chances of that working out are very small. Don't get me started on Spotify.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. But I think the cartoonist's ability to be entrepreneurial and kind of just figure out a way to survive in whatever landscape they're in, I think is unique to cartoonists and to a degree comedians, but cartoonists for sure. They just figure it out, out of pure survival because they can't not do it. It's a compulsion.
That feels delusionally optimistic, but thank you.
It sounds mad. Is what it
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
I
right.
think
Do we do it?
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.